Eli stepped forward, held the jar in both hands, and whispered, "You were really quiet, but I heard you." And then we poured him into the waves. That night we lit incense. I placed the photo of my father on the shelf. Next to it, one of my mother. The space between them didn't feel empty anymore. Eli watched me arrange the candles. "Appa," he said, "when I grow up, will you be in a photo too?" "Yes," I said. "And will I build a shelf for you?" "Maybe. And will I cry when you leave?" "I hope so." "Why?" "Because that means I stayed." Later, when the house was still, I played the first tape. His voice filled the room. Low, measured, unsure. "This is from Min Jun. I don't know if I'll finish these before I go, but I want you to hear my voice, even after it stops. I want you to know I watched you sleep once when you were 6. You had a fever. You mumbled in Korean. I didn't know you remembered how. You were saying, 'Appa, are you there?' over and over. I was. I just didn't know how to answer. I paused the tape. I couldn't go on, not yet. Some silences still needed tending, but I held the recorder to my chest, and I whispered into it, my voice thick. I'm here now. There's an old Korean proverb my father used to quote, always half-muttered, always in passing, like it wasn't meant for me. Malboda Mayomi and Jojo. The heart speaks before words do. I never understood it growing up. I thought it was another excuse for his silence. Another way of saying, you should just know I care without me having to say it. But now, months after his death, I hear it different. I hear it in the small things he left behind. The tucked receipts from Eli's birthday gift, the neatly labeled seeds in his freezer, the final page in his notebook where he'd written my name over and over, like he was practicing how to say it right. He had been writing letters long before I ever knew. Letters in the way he folded rice into a perfect triangle, in the way he smoothed Eli's hair without realizing it, in the way he said my name with a quiet gravity that made me feel 10 years old and seen for the first time. One morning, Eli found a box on our front porch. No return address, inside a small battered suitcase, and a letter. Min Jun, you never saw this bag because I kept it in the attic, buried behind the insulation. It's what I brought with me from Busan when I came to America. Everything I owned fit inside it, except my fear. I wanted to leave it to you, so you could see how small a beginning can be. Start something, even if it scares you, especially then. Love, always. Appa. Eli peeked over my shoulder. Is that Grandpa's handwriting? He reached into the bag, pulled out a wrinkled piece of newspaper with Korean script, a photo of my mother, folded into a plastic sleeve, a wooden spoon darkened by time. What do we do with this? He asked. I looked at him, and I said, we keep going. I started cooking again, not just reheating or following recipes, but cooking the kind of cooking that makes your hands ache and your memory sweat. The kind that starts with washing rice like prayer and ends with soup that tastes like your grandmother's hug. Eli stood beside me, apron sagging off his small frame. What's this one called? Galbi Jim. Did Grandpa make this? No, but his mom did. And maybe her mom too. He chewed on that for a moment, then asked, can I stir? Only if you sing. He laughed, then started humming a trot song my father had taught him, and I swore. For a moment, the room filled with ghosts that didn't feel like loss, but legacy. Later that week, I reopened the recorder. I was ready. I pressed play. If you're listening, it means I'm gone. But you are not. That's what matters. Don't try to be me, or fix me. Just love better than I did. I watched you love your son. You changed something in our family. You ended the silence. Thank you. I hope I made it easier for you to be held. I pressed stop, sat in the dark, and wept. Grief became less of a storm, and more of a rhythm. I started teaching Eli the Korean alphabet. We'd sit at the kitchen table after school, his pencil gripped in his left hand, his tongue poking out from concentration. Appa, is this Mog? Close, flip it like this. He traced it again, lips pursed. Like this. Perfect. What does it mean again? Mom is for Mayam. Heart. He looked up, like the heart that speaks first. I nodded. He smiled, satisfied. Spring came early that year. The jacarandas bloomed like they'd been holding their breath all winter. My father's orchids, replanted, nourished, sung to under breath, began to unfurl. Eli noticed it first. Grandpa's flowers are waking up. Yeah, I said. They remember him. He looked at them seriously. Do you think flowers cry? I think they bloom instead. The night before what would have been my father's 79th birthday, Eli knocked on our bedroom door. He had a folded paper in his hand. A poem, he said, for Grandpa. I took it and read. I see him in the rice steam. I hear him in the wind chime. I miss him when I sleep, but I find him in my dream time. Grandpa, don't be gone forever. Just be gone for now. Love, Eli. I pulled him into my arms. You think he'll hear it? He asked. I kissed his head. He already has. The next morning we took the jar of ashes down to the garden. I dug a hole beneath the lemon tree, the same tree Eli and I had planted years ago back when I didn't know how to be soft yet. We poured the rest of the ashes into the earth. The wind didn't take them. They stayed, fell into the soil like they belonged. Eli crouched beside me, hands in the dirt. What do we say? I thought for a moment, then said, thank you for staying as long as you could. He nodded and whispered, see you in the wind. That evening I lit incense on the small altar we'd built in the hallway nook. 2 photos. My parents, framed in wood. A single candle flickered between them. Eli knelt beside me, hands folded. You think he sees us? I do. Do you miss him? Every day. He nodded. I do too. Then, with all the solemnity of someone much older than 7, he bowed low, deep, proper. I followed, and we stayed that way for a long while. Later, as I tucked him in, Eli asked, Appa, yeah, do you think I'll be a good father someday? I froze, sat on the edge of the bed. You already are. He frowned. But I'm a kid. Exactly, I said. And you already know how to listen, and to cry, and to love out loud. He smiled. I learned from you. I almost broke, but I didn't. I tucked the blanket up to his chin, whispered, I'm proud of you. That night, I dreamed of my father again. He was standing in my kitchen, cooking, chopping scallions with an ease I never saw in real life. He looked up, smiled. You're finally seasoning things right. I laughed in my sleep and woke with the scent of garlic in my nose. Later that morning, I wrote something in the back of his notebook. Just one line. You are not gone. You are just where I finally understand you. And then I closed it. But not to forget, only to begin again. It's strange, the things that survive us. Not our cars, or bank accounts, or the clean lines of our resumes, but the way someone says your name, the smell of broth you taught them to stir, a photograph, a folded shirt, the sound of your laughter echoing in your grandson's mouth. It had been a year, one full cycle of holidays, one missed birthday call, one silence so vast I started measuring time not in weeks or months, but in moments he would have filled. And yet, he was everywhere. In the hum of the rice cooker, in the worn leather comb I found myself using in the mirror, not out of need, but ritual. In Eli's voice when he tried to correct my Korean pronunciation, smug and patient all at once. In the way my body bowed without thinking every time I lit a candle at the altar. My father had become rhythm, I realized was another word for home. On the anniversary of his death I didn't know what to do. Grief has no manual. Korean tradition tells you to honor the dead with food, incense, reverence. But it doesn't tell you what to do with the ache that shows up at 3, or the way your breath catches when you hear your son call you Appa, and realize you finally love that word. So we made stew. Eli helped me chop the radish. He wanted to do the garlic too, but I stopped him. Too sharp. He pouted, so I gave him the job of watching the don't let it boil over. I warned, like Grandpa said, exactly like that. The broth simmered, the house filled with scent. Eli stood guard like a soldier. I lit the incense, placed the small wooden spoon next to the photo. When I turned, Eli was bowing. Not the shallow, distracted kind. A full, deep bend, his head nearly to the floor, his breath steady. 7 years old and already holding more grace than I ever did at 30. He looked up at me. I'm saying thank you, he said, for both of us. That night I took the tape recorder out again. The last tape, labeled in my father's handwriting, for the moment after. I pressed play. If you waited this long, then it means I've already been gone a while. That means you're still holding on. Good. Don't let go too far. Let me stay a little while longer. I don't want to be a stone in your shoe. Just a hand on your back. I hope you remember the day we hugged. I didn't know what to do with my arms. I'd never been held by my own father. Not once. I didn't know it was allowed. But when you reached for me, when you didn't let me pull away, something inside me cracked. It took 47 years. But I learned. Fathers do cry. And sons, when they're ready, forgive. Thank you for breaking the silence. I love you, Min Jun. I love you. I love you. Don't turn this off too fast. Let it play a little longer. Let me stay, just for one more moment. The tape hissed. No more words. I let it play, until it clicked to silence. Later I walked into Eli's room. He was asleep, curled into himself, one hand tucked beneath his cheek, the other clutching the old wooden spoon, like it was a sword. I knelt beside him, watched his breath rise and fall, and I remembered the night. I couldn't hold him, couldn't reach him, when he'd cried from a scraped knee and I said, "You're fine," instead of "I'm here." That night lived in me like a splinter for years. But now I had learned how to pull it out, gently, without breaking the skin. I stood up to leave, but Eli stirred. His eyes opened, heavy with sleep. "Appa?" he whispered. "Yeah. Will you stay a little longer?" I sat on the edge of the bed. "I will." He reached out, his fingers curling into mine. A small, perfect grip, and there it was, the echo of something soft, something inherited, but rewritten. In the morning, I found the jar of seeds my father had left behind, labeled in his careful script, for Eli, for what comes next. We went into the backyard together, dug a hole in the sun, planted them deep. Eli asked what kind of flowers they were. "I don't know," I said. He didn't say. Eli shrugged. "Guess we'll find out." And we watered them. Together. A few weeks later, they bloomed. Bright. Quiet. Yellow as dawn. The petals soft enough to make your heart feel like it could start over. I stood there, barefoot in the grass, the hose trickling water like a benediction. Eli came up beside me. "Appa? Yeah? Do you miss Grandpa today?" "I do," I said, "but not in the same way." "What way now?" "Now, I miss him like I remember him, not like I lost him." Eli nodded. Then he hugged me, arms around my middle, face pressed to my chest, and this time I didn't freeze, didn't hover, didn't forget how. I knelt, held him tight, and let my chest rise and fall against his, steady and whole. He pulled back just slightly and whispered, "You hugged me the same way Grandpa hugged you." I smiled. "You noticed?" "Yeah," he said, "but softer. And that's how it happened. The love that skips generations, not because it disappears, but because it waits for someone to be brave enough to start again. That was me. That will be him. My name is Min Jun. I am the son of a quiet man, the father of a loud one, and this is the story of the hug that took but arrived right on time." The boy cried, not a wail, just that shaky, shallow breathing, like he didn't want to make a sound but couldn't help it. His tiny chest convulsed as tears ran down his face, mixing with the dirt from the park trail. A scraped knee, barely bled, but to him it was everything, and I just stood there. I didn't kneel, didn't reach. My hands hovered near my sides like I was waiting for someone to tell me what to do. My wife, maybe. She wasn't there. Just me, the boy, and the wind, stirring through the eucalyptus trees like some distant whisper I couldn't quite catch. His sobs didn't rise to the sky. They folded inward, as if ashamed of their own noise. I watched his shoulders shake, and then something cracked. Not in him, in me, because suddenly I wasn't in the park anymore. I was on a concrete floor in a cold garage in Inglewood, knees bloody from falling off my dad's old Schwinn. The handlebar had twisted my wrist on the way down, and I could feel the sting of gravel embedded in skin. I wasn't crying. I was trying not to. That was worse. The tightness in my throat, the salty pressure behind my eyes, and my dad, he just looked at me, like I was a stranger. "You okay?" he said. Not a question, not even a statement, just two words that didn't ask, didn't care. I don't think I answered. I just stood up, wiped the dirt from my legs, and bled silently while he went back to fixing the car. That was night. I was 7. Now in 2025, my son, Eli, is 7. Knees scraped, crying, Wait, and I stood there, halfway between fight and flight, caught in a memory I never wanted to inherit. What the hell is wrong with me? I finally knelt, hands stiff, reached out. He flinched, just slightly, like he wasn't sure what came next. "Hey," I said, and my voice broke in ways I didn't expect. His sobs quieted a little, and he looked at me with that trust kids give so freely it shatters you. I touched his knee. The scrape was red and raw, but nothing serious. I should have said something soft, something like "it's okay" or "I've got you." But what came out was "you're fine." God. He winced, not from pain, from me. I saw it, that subtle closing off, the way his little hands pulled toward his chest. A leaf turned in the wind, and I felt a sick kind of grief lodge behind my sternum, because I had become him, my father. I wiped Eli's cheek too hard, trying to fix it with action, not tenderness. "Come on," I muttered. "Let's go home." We walked in silence, except for his hitching breaths. I carried his scooter. My fingers were clenched so tightly around the handlebars that my knuckles ached. That night, after he went to bed, I sat on the back porch and stared at the lemon tree we planted last summer. The sky was that deep indigo before it dies into black. I kept hearing the scrape, his cry, my own cold voice. "You're fine." No, he wasn't, and neither was I. There are phone calls you avoid, not because you hate the person on the other end, but because you're terrified they won't be who you need them to be. I hadn't spoken to my father in almost a year. He sent texts on holiday, forwarded the occasional photo of his orchids. I responded with thumbs up, or the Korean equivalent of "not bad." But that night, I called him. The phone rang 4 times. "Yobo Co." His voice always a little scratchy like the tail end of sandpaper. "Appa," I said, "it's me." Silence. "Min-jun," he said finally. "Why call late?" Late. It was 8:43 p.m. in LA. In New Jersey, it was nearly midnight. I just needed to talk. Appa. I imagined him standing in his kitchen in Paramus, wearing one of his beat-up cardigans, holding the cordless phone like it was still 1997. "You okay?" he asked. Not a question. Not really. "Eli fell today," I said. "Scraped his knee." He cried. "Boys cry," he said without irony. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or cry myself. "You never let me." "Let you what?" "Cry." He didn't answer. I heard a sound like a chair creaking, or maybe it was just the line settling into its old static. "You call me now for this?" "No," I said. "I called because I think I'm turning into you." Now the silence had shape. Heavy, thick. "That bad?" he said, dry, almost amused. I didn't answer. I hung up. The flight to Newark was half full and fully miserable. I told my wife I had to go see him. She looked at me like she wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but instead just kissed my cheek and whispered, "Bring something back." I knew what she meant. Not a souvenir, not photos. Something. Something I'd buried decades ago under layers of detachment and American ambition. Something I didn't even know I still wanted. My father didn't pick me up from the airport. He texted me a ride-share code. Classic. I didn't expect the man to hold a damn sign. Still, I don't know. Some part of me hoped. The car smelled like pine air freshener and old onion bagel. The driver was quiet. I stared out the window at the rows of squat brick houses. The lingering patches of snow turned gray by exhaust and salt. When I arrived, the porch light was off. Typical. I knocked. He opened the door in slippers and that same cardigan I imagined. Hair thinner than I remembered. Wrinkles deeper. "You came," he said, as if I was 5 minutes late for dinner, not 3,000 miles late for a lifetime. I did. "You hungry?" I wanted to scream. "Do you even care why I came?" He blinked. "I make dimen jjigae, from scratch." The broth simmered. The tofu cubes floated lazily among the zucchini and potatoes. The smell was childhood and resentment and comfort all at once. We ate in silence, chopsticks clicking, steam rising. My jaw clenched the entire time. "Do you remember?" I said after the dishes were stacked in the sink. "When I fell off your bike? In the garage?" He didn't look at me, just dried his hands on a faded dish towel. "No, bullshit." He finally turned. "Why bring that now?" "Because I remember everything." I bled, and you said nothing. I cried, and you said I was fine. He met my gaze then, for the first time in years, really met it. His eyes didn't soften, they didn't harden either. They just held me. "I was scared," he said. "What?" You cried. I didn't know what to do. My father would have hit me for that. Crying. Weakness. I tried to be better. Maybe I wasn't. That broke something. You weren't. I whispered. He sat, not across from me, next to me. I hadn't sat beside him in decades. Not since the last time he took me fishing and left me to untangle the lines alone. I want to be better now, he said, but I don't know how. My breath caught. My chest tightened. Neither do I. He reached out, just an inch, fingers shaking. Stopped half. I stared at his hand. That rough skin, the calluses, the nails trimmed short. I remembered those hands holding a wrench, lifting heavy boxes, once swatting my shoulder for talking back. They had never ever held me. I took his hand. He didn't flinch, and suddenly, we weren't in his kitchen. We were back in time. I was 7 again. So was he. Maybe. 2 boys who never got what they needed. Outside, the snow began again, soft, quiet, like forgiveness. Inside, we sat, not talking, not moving, just breathing. But I knew, in that stillness, the conversation had finally begun, and it would not end here. Morning arrived in a slow crawl, muted sunlight, bleeding through the yellowing blinds, slicing the kitchen into strips of golden dust. I hadn't slept. The futon he laid out for me in the guest room was stiff. But that wasn't the problem. It was the silence between us. Not just the present one, but the accumulated weight of 47 years of almost words unspoken, questions unanswered. I lay there with my eyes open, watching the ceiling fan turn in its crooked rhythm, wondering when we learned to survive without softness. I remembered when I was 10 and broke my finger playing basketball. He didn't take me to the ER. He wrapped it in gauze, muttered something about toughness, and told me not to cry. I remember the pain. Yes, but more than that, I remember looking at him, begging for a sign that he saw me hurting. All I got was the back of his head as he walked away. In the kitchen now I heard him moving, his slippered feet shuffling, a cabinet opening, the click of the rice cooker, that sound, that exact button, that same machine he's had for 20 years, that click sent me. Somehow the rice never burns, even when everything else in this house had felt cold. The rice had always been perfect, fluffy, warm, safe. I came in quietly. He was standing at the stove, making gyro and mari, rolled omelette, neatly sliced into rectangles, like little soft sculptures. He used to make it for my school lunches. I hated how it smelled in front of my friends. Now just the scent made my chest ache. You didn't sleep, he said without turning. Neither did you. We were good at this, talking without looking, speaking without touching. You want coffee? I nodded, even though I didn't. He poured 2 mugs anyway. The ceramic clinked against the counter. He slid one toward me. I stared at it. I don't take sugar anymore, he grunted. Still taste like dirt. Yeah. He sat across from me. The chair creaked beneath him, just like it used to when he'd fall asleep watching TV with a can of OB beer cradled against his chest. His hair was thinner, his shoulders smaller, but he was still the mountain I could never climb. You came to fight me? He asked, after a while. No. Then why? I saw Eli cry, and I didn't know how to hold him. He looked at me, really looked. You think that's my fault? I think I needed something from you that you didn't know how to give, and now I don't know how to give it to my son either. His eyes dropped to the table, his fingers idly tracing a chip in the wood. You think I didn't try? I wanted to scream, or laugh, or weep. You were never there. You were home, but you weren't with me. I was working, he said. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. You think that was fun? I didn't need more money. I needed you. He slammed his fist onto the table. Not hard, not violent, just a sharp thud that silenced the room. The coffee rippled. You wanted birthday cards, hugs? Sorry I couldn't be your white friend's daddy. I didn't know how. My father never once said he loved me. Not even when he was dying. I'm not your father, I said, and Eli isn't me. He exhaled through his nose, chest heaving once. No, he said, but you're still scared. I blinked. Of what? Of becoming me. My jaw clenched. I already did. He looked sad then. Not guilty, just tired. Like something in him had always been bracing for this moment, like he knew it would come. He stood and opened the fridge, took out a Tupperware full of kimchi. The smell hit the air, fermented, sharp, familiar. He placed it on the table and pushed it toward me. Eat. Why do you always think food fixes things? Because it's all I have, he said almost under his breath. That stopped me cold. My throat tightened. I reached for the rice, spooned some into my bowl. took a piece of egg. We ate like we did when I was a kid. Quiet, heads bowed, chewing like survival was a muscle memory. He finally said, "You know why I taught you not to cry?" I didn't answer, because crying never helped me. Not once. Not in Korea. Not in America. It made me weak, made people think they could walk over me. I swallowed hard. "So you turned that into a rule?" "Yes. But I'm not you." He nodded. "That's why you came." We sat like that for a long time. He poured more rice. I ate it. He offered seconds. I said yes. Not much else was said. But something had changed. Later, I walked into my old room. It was half storage now. Boxes stacked high with old tax forms, unused exercise equipment, a broken printer, but the bookshelf still held my comic. The wall still bore a faint square outline from the poster he tore down when I got a C in algebra. I ran my hand over the edge of the dresser, still etched with my name in ballpoint pen from night. Then I saw, in the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old ties and moth-bitten scarves, was the photo, the one of me in 4th grade, holding my science fair ribbon, awkward smile, standing next to a model volcano. He was in the background, half cut from the frame, but there, watching. I never remembered him being there. I took the photo and held it up to the light. His face looked proud, not smiling but proud. He had been there, just never said it. That night, I found him sitting in the backyard, under the porch light, his old transistor radio playing a Korean trot song softly through static. He didn't hear me come out. "I found the photo," I said. He looked up confused. "Which one?" "Science fair. 4th grade." He nodded. "You won 2nd place. The volcano was crooked." I laughed despite myself. "You were there." "Of course I was. You never said." "I didn't know I had to." I sat beside him. The night was cold. The radio crackled. A plane passed overhead. "I'm sorry," I said. "For what?" "For hating you." He didn't flinch, just sipped from his tea. "You're a father now," he said. "You understand?" "No," I said. "I want to understand." He looked at me, eyes darker than I remembered, then stopped trying to be me. I thought I was. He reached out again, not a hug, just his hand, resting near mine. I placed mine over his. He didn't move. "It's not too late," he said, "to be different." "For Eli? For you?" I felt something unravel inside me. Decades of bracing, of pretending, of hardening myself into the man I thought I was supposed to be. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The wind rustled the trees. He looked up. "You know," he said, "my father only touched me once. When I was 16, I cried after my mother died. He slapped me, said men don't cry. And you believed him." "I didn't want to, but I did." I turned to him. "I'm going to hug you now." He stiffened. "What?" "I'm going to hug you, because I need to, because I think you need it too." He looked away. "I don't know." "Me neither." But I leaned forward anyway, arms awkward, stiff. We bumped foreheads by accident. But then slowly he let himself fall into it, just barely, his hands on my back, mine on his. It wasn't graceful, but it was real. The first hug in 47 years. A small sob slipped from somewhere deep in my throat. I tried to swallow it back. He didn't move, just whispered, "It's okay, you're fine." And for the first time I believed him. The hug lasted longer than it should have, not because it was comfortable. It was. His arms trembled. Mine didn't know where to go. Our cheeks brushed once, and we both pulled back like we'd touched flame. But it lingered anyway, held together not by muscle or memory, but by something heavier, the ache of absence, and the yearning to undo it. Afterward we didn't talk, just sat. My father wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, rough and casual, like it was sweat, like it didn't mean anything. I didn't point it out, neither did he. That was the code we lived by. Stoicism camouflaged as strength, tenderness buried under duty, and yet something had shifted, like the grout between the tiles of our silence had finally cracked. Later that night, I couldn't sleep again. The futon felt like a slab of confession. I lay there staring at the ceiling, rehearsing conversations that never made it out of my mouth. Things I wanted to ask him, things I wanted him to ask me. Around 2 a.m. I crept into the kitchen. The fridge buzzed with its usual hum, but something about the light over the sink made the whole room feel like a confession booth. I poured a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and remembered something I hadn't thought of in years. I was 12. He came home late, work grease still on his hands, eyes hollow. He opened the fridge, saw nothing but rice and leftover banchan, and without a word started frying an egg. I watched from the hallway. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't.
And he didn't either. He ate in silence, then turned off the light and went to bed. It was the most intimate moment we'd ever had. No words, just hunger and exhaustion. Now, decades later, I stood in the same spot, and I whispered to no one, "Why didn't you ever talk to me?" The silence answered. The next morning he was already up. I could hear the low murmur of a Korean morning show from the living room. Some comedian was shouting over canned laughter. I followed the sound and found him folding laundry on the couch. A t-shirt stretched across his lap, my old high school track shirt. "You kept that." He didn't look up. "You ran fast." "I quit junior year." "You were still fast." I sat beside him, cautiously, as if the cushions might give out. The smell of detergent was sharp. I watched his hands fold with mechanical precision. Corners aligned, sleeves tucked. "Why did you keep this?" I asked again. He shrugged. "Didn't want to throw away." "That's not a reason." He paused. "Maybe I missed you." I stared at him. He didn't meet my gaze. "Just move to the next shirt." "Then why didn't you ever call?" He set the shirt down. I didn't know what to say. "You could have said anything." He exhaled. "When you left, I thought you wanted space. I wanted a father. I didn't know how to be one. Not the way you needed." A beat, then he added, almost a whisper, "I thought if I stayed quiet you'd forgive me on your own." I looked down at my hands, fingers twisting the hem of the track shirt. "You know what's worse than being angry at you?" He didn't answer, not knowing whether you ever thought of me at all. He looked at me then. His eyes didn't fill with tears. They never did, but they softened in a way I'd never seen, like curtains finally drawn back on a room no one had entered for years. "I thought of you," he said. "Every time I saw someone running, every time I saw a father with his son, every time I cooked too much rice and remembered you don't like leftovers." That last part got me. I didn't cry, but I blinked hard. "I don't like rice sticking together." I murmured. "You used to separate every grain," he said, smiling faintly. "Took you forever to eat."
I just didn't want to choke. He chuckled. "You didn't trust me even back then." "I didn't know I could." He nodded slowly, as if accepting a verdict he already expected. We sat in silence again, but it was different this time. Not cold, not brittle, like two people sitting on the edge of something fragile, afraid to move too fast. Finally he asked, "What's Eli like?" I blinked. "You really want to know?" "I want to know my grandson." I smiled, hesitant. "He's sensitive. He notices things. More than he says. Like his mom." "Smart?" "Too smart. Won't stop asking questions." "Good." He cried when he fell off his scooter last week. My father looked away. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "So am I." He stood, folded the last shirt, and walked it to the laundry basket. "Bring him." He said. "Next time." "You think there'll be a next time?" He turned. "There has to be." We took a walk that afternoon, down the same street he used to drag me along to school, back when I'd trudge behind him too embarrassed to hold his hand. The sidewalks were narrower than I remember. The trees smaller. Time does that. It shrinks the things we thought would always tower over us. At one corner he stopped. "This tree," he said. "You carved your name into it." I frowned. "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did. After your first girlfriend broke up with you." "I was 13. You cried." "I did not." "You cried for hours." "Did you hold me?" "No," he admitted. "But I wanted to." I looked at the bark, rough and gnarled. No carving remained. Time had swallowed it. "Why didn't you?" "Because I thought it would make you soft. And I thought softness would ruin you." He looked down. I was wrong. I nodded. "Yeah, you were." That evening he brought out a wooden box. He set it on the kitchen table without explanation. It looked old. Lacquer peeling, the latch rusted. "What's this?" He didn't answer, just opened it. Inside were pieces of a life I'd never seen. A photo of him in military uniform, young, thin, eyes defiant. A yellowing letter in Korean, folded and unfolded so many times it was tearing at the creases. A pressed flower, long dead but perfectly preserved. And a tiny blue sock. I picked it up. "Is this yours?" he said. "You kept this?" He nodded. "You were so small. I didn't know how to hold you." I swallowed. "You never told me about your life. Before America, before me. You never asked. Would you have told me if I had?" He looked down. "Maybe." I picked up the photo. He looked like a stranger. A version of him I never met. Full of dreams or fears or maybe both. "Tell me now," I said. And he did. He told me about walking miles to school in snow that soaked through his shoes, about his mother dying when he was 10, and his father never hugging him again after that, about coming to the US with nothing but a suitcase and a dictionary, about working graveyard shifts, washing dishes, cleaning toilets, translating humiliation into survival, about being mocked for his accent, about saving every dollar to buy me my first computer. He told me things I never knew I needed to hear. By the end of it, the kitchen felt warmer. That night, before I went to sleep, I stood in the doorway of his room. He looked up from his book. "I want you to meet Eli," I said. "I want to meet him." I paused. "Would you ever come visit us in LA?" He set the book down. "Do you think I'd be welcome?" I want him to know where he comes from. I want him to know you." He nodded. "I will come." And then, just as I turned to go, he said, "Minjun." I turned back. "I don't know how to say this in English very well. Say it in Korean." He hesitated, then said, "Mianhetta. Jorigo, Saranghanda." I froze. I'd never heard him say either of those words. Not once. I nodded, swallowed, and said back, "Medoyo Apa." I flew back to Los Angeles 2 days later with the taste of Doon Jongay still in my mouth, and my father's apology echoing through my chest like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. The flight was quiet. I watched the land pull away beneath me, saw the quilt of America stitch itself beneath the wings, frozen rivers, red deserts, rust-colored plains. Every inch of it seemed to hum with the weight of something left behind, and something finally found. When the plane touched down, I checked my phone. No messages from him. I didn't expect one. Our language didn't move that fast, but he had called the night before I left after I'd gone to bed. I found a voicemail. "Minjun, sleep well, be safe. Tell Eli, tell him I will see him soon. Don't forget the kimchi in the freezer." That was it, but it was enough. When I stepped through the arrivals gate, Eli was the first one I saw, standing on tiptoes behind the railing, waving so hard his fingers were a blur. I dropped my bag and crouched just as he ran into me. He smelled like peanut butter and sweat and shampoo. His arms looped around my neck with the kind of trust I hadn't earned. "Not yet." "I missed you, Appa," he said into my shoulder. I closed my eyes. "I missed you too, buddy." When I pulled back, he touched my face. Curious. "Did you cry?" I blinked. "What? Your eyes look like mine when I cry." I laughed, shook my head. "Maybe a little." "You said daddies don't cry." I looked at him for a long moment. "Sometimes," I said. "They have to." He nodded. Solemn. "Good." At home, the lights felt too bright, the walls too white. My life in LA had always felt curated. Clean lines, warm wood, neutral tones. But now it felt like a movie set I'd wandered onto. Fake. My wife hugged me, asked me how it went. I told her it was a beginning. She didn't she knew better than anyone what I kept inside. That night, after Eli went to bed, I took the kimchi out of the freezer, set it on the counter to thaw. I stared at the label, my father's handwriting in Hangul, smudged and crooked. Mayunjo, Jozimhe. Spicy. Be careful. I laughed softly to myself. Over the next week I tried to slip back into routine. School drop-offs, deadlines, grocery runs, but something in me had changed. I felt softer around the edges, like the years I spent sharpening myself into someone unbreakable had dulled. I found myself staring at Eli longer, listening more closely to the things he said, picking him up when he cried, even when the voice in my head, the one that sounded like my father, told me to let him tough it out. One night I was helping him brush his teeth when he asked, "What was your daddy like when you were little?" I froze. I'd dodged that question for years, always said, he worked a lot, or he was serious, or he liked plants. But now, he was quiet, I said, but strong, not in his muscles, in the way he kept going, even when it was hard. "Did he hug you?" "Not when I was little, but once, when I was grown up." He squinted at me. "Only one time?" "Sometimes once is enough," I said. "If it's real." He thought about that, then nodded. "Okay." A week later, the call came. My father had collapsed while tending to his orchids. His neighbor found him, called the ambulance. Stroke, mild, they said, but enough to shake everything loose. I was on a plane the next morning. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and old people in waiting. I found his room easily. Corner suite, small window, A TV bolted to the ceiling showing a Korean soap opera on mute. He looked small. Smaller than before, a white bandage taped above his temple, IV in his arm. He was awake, barely, eyes fluttering in and out of focus. When he saw me, he blinked. Minjun, I'm here. He tried to speak, coughed instead. I grabbed a cup of water, lifted the straw to his lips. He drank slowly. His hand was trembling. I didn't think you'd come again so soon, he whispered. Don't say that, I said too fast. He smiled weakly. You always come late, but always come. Don't joke right now. He nodded. Okay. I sat beside him, eyes locked to the beeping monitor like it could give me answers. Does Eli know? He asked. Not yet. Tell him I was thinking about him. I will. A long pause. Then, I never wanted to be my father. I know, but I became him anyway. Until you made me stop. I didn't reply. You changed something. I felt it. So did I. I'm glad. I reached out, took his hand. He didn't flinch this time. The next day he was better, sitting up, eating watery porridge with mild complaint. The doctor said he'd need therapy, rest, maybe a walker for a while. I offered to bring him to LA, to stay with us for a few months. He didn't answer right away. That night, he called me into the room when the nurse had left. He looked at me with those same eyes, black as wet stone, unreadable. I don't want to be a burden. You won't be. I'll need help going to the bathroom. I changed Eli's diapers for 2 years. I can handle a walker. He smiled, then his face grew serious. I want to teach him Korean. I blinked. He knows a few words. Not enough. He should know the language of his blood. You never taught me. I thought English was your armor. But maybe I was wrong. You weren't wrong. Just, not complete. He nodded. I want to tell him stories, he said, from when I was young. You think he'll understand? No, he said, smiling. But he will feel. We brought him home 2 weeks later. Eli met him at the gate, holding a sign that said, Horaboji Harbian Hyunghayo, welcome Grandpa. My father laughed, a real belly laugh, and ruffled Eli's hair. It was the most natural gesture I'd ever seen him make. That night, they sat on the couch, flipping through an old Korean picture book. Eli leaned against his shoulder. My father stumbled through the words, correcting Eli's pronunciation gently. Every now and then, he'd glance at me. I'd nod, keep going. The three of us had dinner together, kimchi from the freezer, bulgogi I'd ordered in from his favorite place. He said it wasn't spicy enough. Eli said it burned his tongue. I watched them laugh, and in that moment, I realized, this wasn't the end of the story, this was the middle. The first half had been silence, but the rest would be filled with sound. That night, when I was tucking Eli into bed, he whispered, Up, yeah? Can I cry if I miss you? I felt it again, that old instinct to harden, to say no, be strong, be brave. But I'd left that man in New Jersey. So I said, always. He blinked, even if it's a little cry, even if it's a big one. He nodded. Okay. I kissed his forehead, turned off the light. As I closed the door, I heard his voice in the dark. I think Grandpa cried too. I smiled. I think he did. There is a silence that's soft, like dawn, like breath against your neck in sleep. And there is silence that is hard, like bone, like a door that's been shut for so long its hinges forget how to open. My father and I had lived in that second silence most of our lives. But now, in the early mornings, in my house in Los Angeles, I would hear him humming as he stirred rice, the soft clink of metal against ceramic, and that silence began to change shape. He stayed in Eli's room, sleeping on the bottom bunk while Eli clung to the top like a little king in his cloud fortress. The first night I watched from the hallway as my father set out his pajamas folded neat, placed on the corner of the bed. I hadn't seen him do that since I was a child. He used to keep everything folded, even the shirts he wore until the collar frayed. Structure was his oxygen. I should have expected what came next. The next morning he was already awake before anyone else, sitting on the floor in the living room, cross-legged, surrounded by newspaper and half-tended orchid cuttings he'd brought from Jersey in Ziploc bags. His hands moved slowly now, but still with a kind of reverence, like he was tending to something more than roots. He looked up when I came in. You need to change the air filter. Smells stale. I just did, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Then maybe your house is lazy. We both laughed. It startled me, how easily that laugh came. By the second week, Eli had started calling him Haraboji without prompting. No nickname, no translation. Just the raw Korean word, weighted with centuries and softened by the giggle of a child. One morning, I found them at the dining table, heads bent together over a piece of paper.
What are you guys doing? Writing a poem, Eli said proudly, in Korean. My father added, You write poems now? He shrugged. I always did, you just never asked. Eli beamed. Can I read it to you? I nodded, and he cleared his throat like a tiny professor. Dalbit are namuga, apa sengakam yo, joyoung hiu reos. Under the moonlight, the tree quietly cried, thinking of Dad. My heart cracked like old wood. My father looked at me, unreadable, then said, He wrote it. I just helped with the spelling. Eli grinned. Proud. Do trees cry, Appa? I swallowed. Sometimes. He nodded like he understood something deep. Deeper than his years. That evening, I poured my father a cup of tea. He'd taken to sitting on the back deck at sunset, the same way he used to do in Jersey, though the view here was palm trees and a skyline instead of wires and snow-covered roof. He took the tea without a word, sipped it, then frowned. You made it too sweet. You used to like it sweet. I used to like disco too. Still do. He smiled. Maybe. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't hurt anymore, the kind that let things grow. Then, out of nowhere, he said, Your mother used to sit like this. I turned. You never talk about her. She was softer than me. Too soft, maybe. When she died, I got scared. Thought if I let you feel everything she did, you'd end up broken like I was. You never showed me who you were. I said quietly. I didn't know who I was. He said, even quieter. A plane passed overhead. He watched it trail across the sky, a slow line fading into blue. I loved her. You know. I know. She died before I learned how to show it. That hit me like a sucker punch. I looked down at my tea. Cold now. Are you scared you'll die before you learn to love me too? He looked over. Not shocked. Not angry. Just tired. No, he said. I already do. I just don't know how to say it right. Say it wrong. I said. I'll still hear you. That night I found a small package on the kitchen table. No note, just my name in his handwriting. Inside was a folded handkerchief, embroidered, pale blue, a single Hangul character stitched in the corner. Cham, patience, endurance, sincerity. Under it, a photo I'd never seen. My mother, holding me. I couldn't have been more than a few days old. I was swaddled tight. Scrunched face, tiny fist by her chin, and behind her, my father, not smiling but present, one hand on her shoulder, his eyes locked on me, like I was the only proof he'd ever existed. I stared at it, until tears blurred the edges, and I let them fall. No shame, no apology. Fathers cry too. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen. I saw the photo, I said. He nodded. You kept it all this time? Felt too dangerous to throw away. I didn't understand. Why dangerous? Because it made me feel, and back then, I couldn't afford feelings. I put the photo on the counter between us. Now? He looked at me. Now I want to feel everything.
Later that week, I had to run an errand, some client emergency that couldn't wait. I asked Eli if he was okay staying with Haraboji for the afternoon. He nodded without hesitation. When I came back, I found them on the living room floor again. Eli's head in my father's lap, fast asleep, a small dog-eared book of Korean folktales on the carpet beside them. My father was brushing Eli's hair back gently, over and over, like he was soothing a ghost. He looked up at me and whispered, He trusts me. Yes, I said. He does. I didn't think I'd get that again. You haven't lost it. That night after Eli went to sleep, my father stood in the kitchen doorway watching me wash dishes. I leave next week, he said. I dropped a plate back into the sink too hard. It clattered, didn't break. So soon doctors want me back for follow-ups, and the plants miss me. You could stay. He didn't answer. You could stay, Appa, I said again. He walked into the kitchen, stood beside me. This was your home. You built this. I don't want to crowd it. You don't crowd it, you fill it. He looked down. I don't know how to live here. I didn't know how to love you either, but I'm learning. He nodded, slowly. I'll come back, he said. When it's spring, I'll bring new seeds. The day he left, Eli cried. Not loud, just quiet tears, face pressed into my shirt. Can't he stay forever? No, I said. But he'll come back. You promise? He promised, I said. Did he ever promise you something before? I paused. No, I said. But this time, I believe him. That night, Eli drew a picture, 3 figures holding hands under a cherry tree. He labeled them in crayon. Me, Appa, Grandpa. Below it, in his shaky Hangul, Sarangyun Dora Onyun Gyout. Love is what comes back. I taped it to the fridge, and I cried in the hallway, where no one could see. Spring arrived slowly in Los Angeles, more of a suggestion than a season, hinted at through longer days, softer light, and the scent of jacaranda petals dropping like whispers onto the pavement. And with it, the promise my father had made. I'll come back. I didn't tell Eli the exact date. I wanted to spare him the disappointment if something happened, if my father changed his mind, or if his body gave out before his heart did. But some part of me knew, deeper than bone, that he would come, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because something had shifted in him too, something permanent. And when the doorbell rang one mild Sunday morning, Eli was the first to the door. "Gramp," he yelled, voice cracking with joy, feet skidding across the wood floor in socked urgency. There he was, slippers, cardigan, orchid cuttings wrapped in wet newspaper under one arm, a suitcase in the other. He looked thinner, but steady. His walker was folded in the trunk of the taxi he'd taken from the airport, untouched. Eli slammed into him with such force I feared the old man would tip, but he braced, knees locked, arms out, and caught him with a grunt that dissolved into a laugh. "You grew taller," he said. "And you got older," Eli replied. My father looked at me over Eli's shoulder, his mouth twitching at the corners. "I told you I'd come." I nodded. "You did, and I meant both the visit and the return to us." He stayed longer this time. Weeks melted into one another like the slow drip of honey. The days took on a rhythm. Breakfast together, usually rice, eggs, and something fermented, followed by a walk around the block with Eli. Then stories under the oak tree in our backyard, naps in the late afternoon, and quiet dinners where we passed dishes like we were passing time itself. He taught Eli to kneel properly on the floor, palms to thighs, back straight. Not out of deference but awareness. "You must know how to sit still before you can move with meaning," he'd say. One evening after dinner, he watched me doing dishes. "You rush everything," he said. "It's just dishes." He shook his head. "Nothing is just anything." I paused, soap suds dripping from my fingers. "I rushed through most of my life," I admitted, always afraid I'd run out of time. "You still might," he said, then added, "That's why you have to learn to stand still. Breathe, let your son see you pause." "Why?" "So he knows he's not the only one allowed to feel." I turned to him. "You used to think feelings were weakness." "I still do," he said, smiling. "But now I know weakness is not showing them." One night he asked if we could visit the ocean. "I haven't seen it since your mother died." We drove just before dusk, Eli in the back seat singing made-up songs about sea monsters and sandcastles. My father rode in the front, silent, eyes on the fading sun. When we reached El Matador Beach, he moved slow, his knees stiff, his hands curled around his cane, but he walked down every step. Onto the sand, he removed his shoes, and he stood at the edge of the Pacific, eyes wide. "She would have liked this," he said. "She would have loved Eli." I added. He nodded. "I think she sees him." He bent slowly, painfully, and picked up a small, smooth rock. He pressed it into my palm. "When you miss me," he said, "hold this, let it cool in your hand. Remember that even the hardest things soften in time." I didn't speak. We stood together, the three of us, until the water kissed our feet, and for the first time in my life I realized we were whole. Not perfect, but whole. The next morning he had a small notebook open at the table, a black pen, fine-tipped, his handwriting neat, deliberate. "What's that?" I asked. "A letter." "To who?" "You." I froze. "Can I read it?" He shook his head. "When I leave." I didn't argue. That day, he taught Eli how to bow properly. Not a half-hearted dip, but the full bow from the waist. Hands at his side, eyes to the floor. "Why do we bow?" Eli asked. "To show the world you respect more than yourself." Eli practiced for hours. At bedtime he bowed to me before crawling into bed. "Good night, Appa," he said. I bowed back. "Good night, son." The day my father left again, Eli cried. Not from despair, just from the ache of knowing something was about to shift again. "Will he come back?" "Yes," I said. "You promise?" He promised. That night, after I put Eli to bed, I found the notebook on the kitchen table, my name written on the cover in hand. I opened it. Inside, in measured lines, Min Jun. I don't know what kind of father I was. Sometimes I was stone. Sometimes I was smoke. Sometimes I was so afraid to break that I forgot how to bend. You were never the problem. I just didn't know how to love someone without hiding. But now I see, watching you with Eli, watching him cry, and you not flinch. That healed something in me. You're a better man than I ever dared to be. And still I hope a piece of me in you is worth keeping. Forgive me for the years I stole with my silence. You have them back now. Your son is lucky. So was I. Sarananda. Chongma. Abpa. The tears came quietly, like tide on moonless water. I pressed the notebook to my chest and whispered thank you. Weeks passed. Eli started asking fewer questions about where Haraboji was. Instead, he began telling stories. Grandpa says the moon is the same in Korea and America. Grandpa says crying is like rain. It helps things grow. Grandpa says old people are just time travelers who forgot how to leave. I listened, and I wrote every word down. One night, Eli scraped his elbow. He didn't wail, just stood on the back porch, blood trickling down his forearm. I came out with the first aid kit, heart already braced. He looked at me, no fear. It hurts, he said. I know, I said. And I kneeled, wiped the blood gently, blew cool air over the sting. Then without thinking I kissed it. Eli stared at me wide-eyed. You kissed it? Yeah, like Grandpa did when I stubbed my toe. I paused. Exactly like that. He grinned, toothy and proud. And I realized, it was working. The cycle had broken, and what grew in its place was love, soft and sturdy. That night, before I turned out the light, I looked at the rock my father gave me. It was warm, from the sun, from my palm, from memory. I didn't know, but I knew it was mine now. To carry, to pass down, to let soften over time. Time is a tide. It recedes so slowly you don't notice what it takes with it, until you reach for something that's no longer there. It had been 6 months since my father left our home in Los Angeles, his second departure somehow heavier than the first. Not because it came with pain, but because this time it came with peace, the kind you don't want to let go of, the kind that makes you believe silence can be something holy if it follows something honest. He called every Sunday. Eli would sit cross-legged on the living room rug, the phone held with both hands like it was a sacred object, his voice lilting between Korean and English, with an ease I never had. I watched them talk, watched my father's laugh echo through the phone, watched Eli try to mimic it. It was like watching a bridge be built where once there had only been water. And I listened from the kitchen. Sometimes I'd speak, sometimes I'd stay quiet, one hand on the counter, heart swollen with something that had no name. But one Sunday he didn't call. The next day still nothing. By Tuesday I called him. No answer. By Thursday I was booking a flight. Jersey in October is a soft decay. The air bites but doesn't draw blood. The trees wear their grief in red and gold. The house looked the same, faded siding, porch light out, orchids wilting behind the screen door. But the key under the mat was still there. So were his shoes in the entryway, his jacket on the hook, his slippered footprints pressed into the dust on the kitchen tile. I found him in the sunroom, asleep, or something like it. His breath was shallow, his skin pale, but he stirred when I touched his shoulder. Minjun? I'm here. His eyes fluttered open. I was dreaming about your mother. She was angry, said I still fold the towels wrong. I laughed, but my throat closed around it. You didn't answer the phone. I didn't want you to worry. Too late for that. He smiled faintly. You came anyway. I always will. The doctor came later that afternoon, listened, tested, drew blood. My father sat quietly through it all, like he was humoring the world one last time. When the doctor left, I poured him tea. Kidneys failing, he said flatly. It's time. Time for what? For everything to slow down. I couldn't breathe. You said you'd come back in the spring. I did. You said you'd keep coming back. He nodded, and I did. Every time I heard Eli laugh on the phone, every time you said Appa without flinching, I was there. You're not dying. I'm not afraid to. I looked at him, hard. I am. He took my hand across the table. It was the first time he reached for me without hesitation. Then take what I leave. Make it live. We spent the next few days in a kind of suspended grace. I cooked. He critiqued. You put too much garlic, he said. You used to say there's no such thing. That was before I got old. We sat by the window, watching leaves fall. You remember when you got into Berkeley? He asked. Barely. I cried. I blinked. You did? Locked myself in the bathroom.
Didn't want you to see. I didn't understand that tears weren't shameful. They were proof. Proof of what? That I felt something. I leaned back, head against the wall. Why didn't you tell me? He shrugged. I didn't know how. You know how now. Yes, he said. And now there's time. On the 5th night, I asked if I could record him. For Eli. Someday. He nodded. I set up my phone. He cleared his throat. Then, in soft Korean, he began to speak. Eli, you are the first man in our family who will grow up allowed to cry. I hope your tears come easily, and your heart stays open. I hope you run toward people, not away. I hope you love louder than I ever could. And if you feel afraid, remember this voice. Remember this love. You are the grandson of a quiet man, but you are the echo that gives him shape. He paused, looked at me. Okay? He asked. I couldn't speak. Just nodded. He reached over and turned off the recorder himself. That night, I dreamed of him, as a young man, standing in a rice field, shirtless, sun on his back, smiling. When I woke, he was gone, not dead, just gone. I found him outside, barefoot on the lawn, head tilted back. What are you doing? He opened his eyes. Just needed to feel something. Like what? Grass, sky, this body before it forgets how to live in it. I stood beside him. He looked over. When I die, he said, don't bury me right away. What? Wait one day, just in case I change my mind. Appa. I'm serious. I smiled. Okay. He died 2 weeks later, peacefully, in his sleep. No dramatics, just breath, then none. Eli was the first person I told. We sat on the back steps, dusk settling over the world. He's not coming back, Eli asked. No. I said. Did he say goodbye? He said he'd always be with us. Where? I pointed to my heart. Here, then to his, and there. Eli looked up at the sky, then said, I'm going to write him a poem. I think he'd love that. The funeral was small. Korean church, psalms, sung in trembling harmony. My name mispronounced by the pastor. But I didn't correct him. My father wouldn't have either. Eli wore a black hanbok, said he wanted to be strong and beautiful like Grandpa. I gave the eulogy in both languages. In English I said, he was a man of few words but every silence had weight. I did not know how much I needed him until he was already halfway back to me, but we met in the middle, and that was enough. In Korean I said, Ga. Vai. Sarang yun joyang hajanyan. Kota jidiuli nida. His love was quiet, but I heard it to the end. After the burial, I brought Eli back to the house. I opened the notebook my father had left behind. The one I hadn't finished reading, near the end. In shakier handwriting. You called me Arpa, even when I didn't deserve it. That name saved me. When I hear it now, even from the grave it will sound like forgiveness. That night, Eli placed his poem on our altar. A folded paper crane, a drawing of a tree with tears like blossoms, and the words Sarang yun ape yuman doronda, love hurts but it comes back. I lit the incense, and for the first time in my life I bowed to my father, not out of guilt or shame or tradition, but out of love. And when I rose I felt him, not gone, just quiet. And everywhere, grief doesn't announce itself, it moves like steam slipping through the cracks of doors, condensing on your windows, fogging everything just enough to make you question what's real. I walked through my father's house for the first time after the funeral like I was moving underwater. Every room had a residue. The couch still held the indentation of where he used to fall asleep during the 6 o'clock news. The bathroom mirror bore fingerprints no one had yet wiped away. The calendar on the fridge still read last month, circled with a red pen, Eli birthday, call early. I touched it like it might still be warm. My wife stayed home with Eli, giving me the space she knew I'd need but didn't know how to ask for. The silence of the house was deafening. I found myself whispering things aloud. I'm just here for a little while. Or I'll take care of it, Appa. As if he were in the next room, and I didn't want to disturb him. But he wasn't. And still the house felt like him. I found myself tiptoeing around like a child again, careful not to move the wrong object. Not to shatter whatever spell had kept this place his for so long. In his study the desk light still worked. He always used a bulb with a soft amber hue. Better for the eyes, he claimed. It cast a warm halo over the wood, over the notes he'd left, the receipts he'd stacked in neat piles, the half-finished crossword puzzle in the Korean daily paper. But there was something else. A small envelope taped beneath the drawer. I almost missed it, yellowed from time the tape brittle. My name written on the front, in Hangul Minjun Egg, to Minjun. Inside a single sheet of paper, If you're reading this, then the house is yours now. Do with it what you want. Sell it, keep it, paint the walls. I don't care. But please, go upstairs. There's something I never finished. Maybe you can. I had never gone upstairs. Growing up, the top floor had been unfinished, just beams and insulation and storage. But now, as I climbed the narrow stairs, I noticed the smell first: wood, dust, and something floral, orchids, faint and dry. The attic was half converted. He'd started building something. Against the far wall stood a low, unfinished altar, not religious, at least not in the traditional sense, but reverent. A ledge wide enough for photographs, a small shelf for candles. On the wall above, hung on a nail, was a single photo. My mother, her face younger than I remembered, hair pulled back, eyes looking past the camera into something I'd never see. I stepped closer, beneath the photo in my father's handwriting. For everything I never said, and beside it, blank space, enough for one more photo. Mine. I didn't cry. Not yet, but my hands shook as I traced the wood, felt the dust, touched the corners where he must have hammered, measured, planned. I could imagine him here alone, kneeling in his cardigan, rubbing his temples, muttering in Korean at a bent nail or a crooked line, building a place for memory, for mourning, for the things he could only bring himself to say. With wood and space, I stood in that attic for what felt like an hour. Then I sat, on the floor, cross-legged, just like he used to, and I whispered, "I forgive you." Because what else do you say in a room someone built to house their guilt? The next day, I packed his things. Not all of them, just the ones I couldn't leave behind. The handkerchief with Cham stitched in the corner, his wedding ring, still looped through the chain he wore under his shirt, the small wooden comb he used every morning with delicate precision. His voice recorder old, scratched, full of tapes. I didn't know what was on them. I couldn't press play. Not yet. Grief needs time to unclench. At the airport, I checked the bag with his ashes. The TSA agent looked at the container, then at me. "Human remains?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. He nodded. "Sorry for your loss." I didn't know how to respond, so I said what my father might have: "Thank you for your work." He looked surprised, then smiled. And just like that, the world felt softer. Back in LA, I didn't tell Eli what was in the bag. Not at first. He met me at the door, arms outstretched, questions spilling from his mouth like marbles. "Did you find Grandpa's house?" "Yes." "Did it smell like old books and kimchi?" "It did." "Did he leave you anything?" I knelt, pulled the recorder from my backpack, handed it to him. He left stories. Eli took it carefully, reverently. "Can we listen?" "Not yet," I said. "Soon," he nodded, understanding more than I'd said. The next morning, I opened the urn. Not all the way, just enough to see the bone fragments, the ash, the truth of finality. And I knew then, I couldn't bury him in a cemetery. Not yet. He needed to be somewhere he could still watch. So I took a jar, a small one, and I poured a handful of his remains into it. Then Eli and I drove to the ocean, the same beach we'd stood on together, the one where he had said, "I just need to feel something." We stood on the shore, the wind pressing salt into our mouths. "What is that?" Eli asked. "It's part of Grandpa." He blinked. "Like his soul?" "No," I said. "His body, his soul's already watching us." He looked at the jar, then the sea. "Can I say goodbye?"